welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live, and I'm Cyril Stover. Nigeria, like many nations, aspires to a healthy environment to advance industrialization. However, the challenges of climate change and, to a large extent, the impact of human activities on a daily basis do pose a threat to the ecosystem. It has been observed that Nigeria's environment suffered extensive damage arising from human and natural causes. More worrisome for many is the high level of pollution and land degradation in parts of the country that affect the people's means of livelihood. Now, given the consequences of unhealthy environment and sustenance of life on the planet, the government, especially in recent times, has intensified efforts to tackle environmental challenges and degradation. This is evident with a commitment to the cleanup of Ogoniland destroyed by oil leaks and the destruction of surrounding waters and farmlands. Another area of focus in the last 3 years is lead poisoning, with proactive measures being put in place to tackle it. There are other areas like the Great Green Wall to address desertification, but first let's see this report by Mie Ogidi.
The environment is man's common heritage. However, it's being attacked from different fronts. The oil-polluted land in the south-south, industrial pollution in northwest, desertification in the northeast, drying up of the Lake Chad, gully erosion in the southeast, and lead poisoning in solid mineral mining sites are great threats to the environment. Increase in these challenges lead to shredding of resources. So, the federal government was frontal in 2015 to address these issues. The role of climate change in some of these issues cannot be exonerated. So, the first major international engagement of President Muhammadu Buhari was the Climate Change Conference in Paris, France, and all the resolutions were religiously implemented in Nigeria. Talks at the conference were directed at recharging the Lake Chad to save the lives of more than 40 million people and turning the dry land to green vegetation through the planting of trees, as the National Agency for the Great Green Wall is taking this upon itself.
This administration is laying a foundation for change.
June 2nd, 2016 was the watershed in Ogoniland as the cleaning up of the degraded oil-rich land began with $1 billion budget. 3 years later, the boots are finally on site as $200 million is provided as required.
The government is still committed to the 1 billion, which is going to be 200 million every year for 5 years.
To control industrial pollution, which contributes greatly to climate change, the President has signed the amended NESDRA Act to control pollution.
This amendment becomes the responsibility of the judge to sanction the regulated community according to the gravity of the offense without any limit.
In Southeast and other parts of the country, the Ecological Fund Office is embarking on massive land reclamation projects. As of last year, more than 100 remediation work were carried out.
2 projects were ecological interventions that cost the federal government over 700 million naira.
In view of the impact mining activities are having on the environment and other health challenges, interministerial collaboration between the Ministry of Environment and that of Mines and Steel Development came to effect, and mining companies are now compelled to take responsibility of any impact their activities are having on the environment.
While one believes in the exploration and exploitation of our natural resources for national development and for the upliftment of our people, it should not be done at the detriment of the health of our dear citizens.
In all, environment experts see the attendance of President Muhammadu Buhari on major international conferences on environment matters as a demonstration of strong political will. Mie Ogidi, NT News.
All right, that report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let's start off by introducing our guests. I would like to welcome to this program Minister of Environment, Suleiman Hassan Zarma. Minister, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
We're also joined tonight by Dr. Marvin Dekil, Project Coordinator, Hydrocarbon Pollution Remediation Project, Ogoni Cleanup. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Let me also welcome to this program Chambers Omezulike, Senior Programs Manager, Connected for Development. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We're also joined tonight by Dr. Peter Tarfa, Director of Climate Change and Nigeria's focal person. Thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure.
Let me welcome Dr. Shola Adipoju, Director General, CEO of Forestry Research Institute of Nigeria. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And joining us from our Lagos Network Center is Dr. Muktari Aminu Kanu, Director General, Nigerian Conservation Foundation. He joins us from our Lagos studio. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Good evening.
Full house, and that tells you how important the environment is. And so let me, as usual, acquaint you with the procedure. At the appropriate time, you can get to be part of the discussion in the studio. The various platforms will be there on your screens. You can take advantage of them. However, as we always say every Tuesday, for those who are calling in tonight, do us a favor when your call gets through, turn down the volume of your TV set. Just reduce the volume. That's the way to avoid the hurlback or the echo. And the best way to know that your call has been passed through to the studio, you'll see your name appear on screen. Now, once that happens, it means that your call is through, direct to the studio. Once you see your name, just go right ahead, ask a question, make your comment, just make your contribution straight away. Don't bother about the greetings. You might not have much time to do that. Just go straight to the point and keep it short so others can also get on the platform. So once again, thanks for joining us on NTA Tuesday Live. It's all about the environment tonight, and so let's begin turning to the minister and finding out just what it is like, because you hear all kinds of things about the environment, and at some point in time, some people might just worry and say, do we really have a safe environment in Nigeria? Because there have been so many things about what the environment is, degradation and all that. So let's start from that premise.
Very well. Good evening, viewers. The environment, of course, is something that everybody is interested in, because everything happens in an environment. And when you hear of degradation, it means something is lost, and economic activity on the environment or the biological profit of the land, of the environment is lost. So you hear degradation. And when that happens, it also has an economic component, a health component, and so on. So it will interest any person what happens within his environment from either our actions or from some natural causes. What are our actions? Our maybe methods of farming, increase in population, so need for more spaces to either build or do some other activity, cutting down of trees to get energy, and so on and so forth. These are man-made things that will impact on the environment, and so people should be interested in what happens. Now, what are the natural causes? Natural causes could be, of course, erosion or desertification, like you rightly mentioned in the introduction. So I think this is what generates interest in people on what happens in the environment.
All right, we'll come to them, but development also comes with its own price. And when we talk about hydrocarbons, and yes, you've got the liquid gold under the surface of the earth, but in putting that to good use, there are also challenges. So how bad is the situation regarding hydrocarbons in this country?
Well, like you rightly stated, a hydrocarbon, it's a source of energy, and there is an intensive demand for it. There is high demand for it across the world. Here in Nigeria, it's a main source of income for us, and that means that the commercial activities relating to hydrocarbon abound. And the region where this is done also have come with its consequences. one of it, which is the oil spill. And we know the reason the oil could be spilled through actions of the community, the oil companies, and other things. But the fact remains that we have oil spill in our environment. And government has come up over the years, very particularly the government of President Buhari, has gone ahead to respond to over 4 decades of spillage in the country. And that followed an initial report that was done in Ogoniland and in 4 local governments of Tai, Gokana, and Elime, and Kana as well. And that report, which was submitted in 2011, only got implemented 2017 with the present administration. And what we've gone ahead to do is reach out to the community, let them understand the need to clean their land, let them understand the need to reclaim their degraded land, for them to have the water fresh, so that their terrestrial and aquatic life in the environment is restored, to reconstruct the ecosystem that would have been damaged over this period. And that's what we continue to do. At the point where we are today, we're happy to announce that we have 16 companies introduced to the various communities with the impacted land in Ogoniland. Those companies are on site, and we've introduced them to the sites, and they are at work. We believe that this will be a continuous process until all the degraded land in this place is remediated. And after remediation, there will be a period of restoration. And for those who have read the UNEP report, that report is to be implemented over a period of 25 to 30 years. Most of this time will be for restoration of aquatic and terrestrial life in this area. So the effect of oil spill and degradation exists, but there is also a remedial mechanism, and that is what we're doing at this time.
More about that as we go on in the program. But then it's said that the very existence of man will certainly have will certainly impact on the environment. And so with natural causes and human activities, how do you begin to strike a balance as to sustain this planet, which is the only one we have so far, in spite of advances in science and forays into outer space? This is just the only home that mankind knows for now.
Okay, so for us, we are representing the civil society. So what we normally do is that, with respect to these environmental consequences, we do high-level advocacy, calling on all relevant stakeholders, drawing attention to these issues, to remediate, to restore, the environment and all that. And I want to start with a story. In 2015, there is a community in Niger State called Shikira community. So the community was affected by lead poisoning. Over 20 children died. Over 68 needed urgent medical attention. We heard it from the news reports. So what we did immediately was that we went to the community to observe. We followed the money, so we work with communities. Went to the community, and we noticed that even Doctors Without Borders, they were there. But they couldn't treat those children because the environment was already contaminated. So we came back after we've collected those human and good stories, and we said high-level advocacy, targeting the Minister of Environment. Then that was Madam Amina Mohammed, the current UN DSG. So we called her attention to it, called the attention of the relevant Senate committee on it, and we started rallying all the stakeholders around to address the issue. So after all the efforts, a national emergency was actually declared in that respect, and Amina Mohammed was able to, ensure that the community was made a provision for in the 2016 budget for a cleanup, for a remediation. So we followed through the process, go back to the community, sensitize them about the amount. It was around 500 million naira that was released. So we followed the money all through the entire process until the community was actually cleaned up. And as of now, as of mid-2017, the community was already cleaned up. So from the part of the civil society, we know that these issues are there, these challenges are there across the country. So whenever there is such an outbreak, we rally stakeholders together, and when funds are released, we follow the money to make sure that that the government does what.
Okay, the key word here you said sensitization. We'll return to sensitization and some of these activities. Putting certain measures in place so they don't start in the first place, but we'll return to that. Dr. Peter Tarfa, there are people who will tell you today that there's all so much fuss about climate change, and even the so-called advanced economies are pulling back. Yet, every day we continue to see the effects of climate change.
Thank you very much, Cyril, and thank you, viewers. The issue of climate change is indeed a reality. Science has proven it beyond any doubt. But basically, it is important to know that the issue of tackling climate change is about bread and butter. The international community have seen the need to tackle this particular problem, which is a global concern. However, like I said, it will cost huge amount of resources to be able to tackle that. It will also transform the way businesses are done all over the world. And to be able to do that, there's need for a lot of research, there's need for a lot of private sector involvement, there's need for government policies to be transformed, there's need for public resources to be allocated to tackle the issues of climate. So-called developed country you mentioned that have appetite towards it is not that because it is not a reality, but because of the quantum of resources that is involved in it. That is why they said is flair to their economy. But however, you will understand that what we are seeing globally all over, the challenges, the consequences of climate change, flooding all over, sea level rises, issues of forceful migration, which are all attributed to issues of climate change, even in the area of food security too. So this is completely a reality, and science has proven that it is so. It is not a false.
Okay, thank you. We'll look at some of those effects, and we're battling with one very big one now. But let's come to Dr. Adepoju, the CEO of Forestry Research Institute.
Thank you.
The Earth's resources have been depleted, a lot of it through the activities of man, particularly in this part of the world. We used to know about forest reserves. I don't know whether we do still have them at this time, but what is certain is that forests have been depleted because of development. Cities have been built, mega cities, and once these are in place, the vegetation goes.
Thank you, Siri, and thank you, viewers. You just hit the point on the head. But we must also realize that this is something that has happened over the time. It's not just happening now. The Honorable Minister was with us in about a few days ago, and we tried to look at all of this issue. We realized that the forest reserve that our forefather painstakingly put in place for the country has depleted beyond 40–50%. But you will still appreciate that this current administration has tried to do its best via what we call green bond that is being floated now. And you'll be shocked that if what is done just last year alone has been the practice in the last 20 years, we will be far out of the crisis of the forest degradation that we have now. Just last year alone, all the agencies and departments responsible for planting under Ministry of Environment were able to put together 834.6 hectares of planting. And not only planting, the Honorable Minister has taken his time to be going after these plantations one by one. Now, if you add this to the only 4 million hectares of forest cover left in the country, that means in 1 year alone, we almost achieved 1 million, which has added to the only 4 million left, which is accounting for the 5% that Nigeria has as a forest cover. So just in 1 year, we're able to add 834.6. And we sustain that for 10 years. They will not be too far from eating the 25% required by the world standard of at least the forest cover Nigeria should have. Beyond that, when this current administration came on board and we had to brief the Mr. President, one of the things we are asked to look is what would be the alternative source of energy. We must find alternative source of energy, otherwise the rural populace must cook.
Right.
And so we're also looking at that. And just as my brother said there, if we to be planting and we don't see how to combine it to solve the food security problem, then we're still going to run into crisis. And that's what brought about agroforestry. That while you are doing your arable cropping, you can still intercrop with various economic trees or hardwood. So that at the point they form canopy and you can no longer plant the arable crop, the return on the economic trees we've planted, which we have worked on more than 15 various Nigerian indigenous tree species now, who in the past or from the wild, you expect them to come to gestation, that's the cycle of maturity, at 20-25 years. But with the mandate and the push we have, we'll be able to shorten their gestation period to max 5 years of fruiting. So if a farmer can no longer do arable, and in 5 years, is getting return from ogbono, is getting return from agbalumo, is getting return from bitter kola, is getting return from vetilaria, that's shea butter, is getting return for pakia, that's locust bean, which will not only assist the subsistence farmer, but contribute to Nigeria GDP. So if we sustain this for the next 10-20 years, you will know that most farmers will go back to the village and we'll be able to at least ensure that the environment is safe, as well as support the economic and social life of our people. Thank you.
All right, well, we'll come to that because for me, I still see so many challenges here. The need to develop and the need to conserve nature. But let's go over to our Lagos Center, and where we're joined by Dr. Muktari Aminu Bello, Director General of the Nigerian Conservation Foundation, NCF. The need to conserve, I started talking about that, and the need to develop side by side. How do you strike a balance?
I think it's a false choice, Cyril, to think that you can either develop or conserve your natural resources. In fact, both must go together because your development depends on the natural resources themselves. So however much difficult it is, we have to find a way to bring about that balance. And in many cases, there are low-hanging fruits. It's not so difficult. It's just a question of us realizing, as Nigerians, as human beings, that nature is a part of us and that we are a part of nature. And you cannot separate the two. We live in nature, we breathe nature, we eat nature, and nobody destroys his where he lives and then lives comfortably. So that balance must be found somewhere. And like I said, it's not so difficult in some cases. It is a bit more challenging in other cases. But even there, it's not rocket science to look after the environment and still develop. That is why the whole world came together right from the 1990s and started talking about sustainable development. So development that does not take care of the environment is not true development because it's undermining the base, whether it's your economic base or your social base for which you develop. So I see it as like somebody sort of inheriting a pot of cash from his parents or grandparents, and then you spend, and don't replenish. So if you spend without income, you're going to run out of money. And unless you are myopic and you don't think of the future, you will know that you have to really balance your spending with your income. So that's the balance that we need to get. And that's the balance that, like I say, there are many examples in all areas about how you can achieve that sustainable development so that you don't see development only as economic well-being. Development is not about how rich you get forever. It's not about only your material well-being. Development is also about your environmental well-being, your social well-being, and many other things. Your health, your education, your everything is just as important as your material richness and wealth. And that's why many people don't measure their progress of their community and the development of the community only in terms of the pile of cash you have. You measure your development and your well-being in a lot of other dimensions than just cash. And the more you think in terms of cash and the more you look at material well-being only to the detriment of all the other aspects of life that make you develop, then the more you think you should exploit nature to the maximum, and the more you get into these problems of environmental degradation that we are. But there is an alternative paradigm, an alternative model where you can still develop, abolish poverty, live reasonably well without undermining your environmental resources.
A little longer. And what we might ask at this point is, what's the level of awareness generally among the populace? Because there's so many people who tend to think that the Earth's resources are limitless and human activities only at most provide a tiny scar on, the resources of the Earth. So how much awareness has been spread around the populace? There are people who do things and they just think, well, the Earth has been there for so many hundreds of thousands of years, and it's not what one generation does that's going to bring it down. And, people also have this idea that you're not even going to talk about what the effect of human activities would be in maybe 100 or 200 years and say, what do we bother? We're not going to be around at that time, are we?
You are right. I think the level of sensitization, the level of awareness is not enough. But there is enough data, enough scientific information if people care to look, and if people care to promote it. So those of us who are concerned and passionate about this issue need to do more in terms of getting awareness out there, sensitizing people right in the community, right across the whole country. But awareness should also go with admonishing people to change their habits, because part of the problem with environmental degradation, and as well part of the solution, is to do with the attitudes and behavior of the person on the street. And so some of it government needs to do some actions, some of it companies need to do the right action, but each of us as an individual need to do their bit. And that's where the point you make comes in, that are we doing that our bit? Are we conscious enough and conscientious enough to do that our bit for the environment? Are we a food is ready nation, as people say? We just want to eat what is available for today and forget about tomorrow. Now, that is really a huge task that a lot of us, especially those of us on civil society, do. And we have lots of different ways of doing it. We do it with school children to catch them young. We do it with communities in community. We do it with the press, just like what you are doing right here. And we have to do through all avenues, really spread the awareness as much as possible. Now, if somebody says the environment will always be there as it is, all you need to do is point to him or her the problem that we are already having now of climate change, how it is getting warmer, how we are getting more floods, how we are getting more bushfires, how the storms are getting worse, how fodder is getting less, how many more conflicts we are having. And that might open their eye to the fact that really it's not, the environment is not an issue of tomorrow. It is already hitting us today.
About attitude, change of habits, change of attitude. Minister, let's look at another point that's been difficult to tackle, that of waste and pollution. Industrial waste, domestic waste, that is also a challenge for this part of the world, in this country especially. That's before we begin to go into what the government has been doing in terms of the Ogoni cleanup, in terms of other environmental issues in the Niger Delta, for instance, and other matters. But first, the question of industrial waste and, of course, the very ones we are all too familiar with, the ones in the cities and towns and the household waste.
Yes, waste management is really a huge issue. It is also now an attitudinal thing. The regulatory agency that controls this waste management, either industrial or domestic waste, is doing their bit. But the attitude of the Nigerian is what is worrisome. People throw filth anywhere and nobody cautions one another. But that is, again, what we all have to imbibe ourselves to take care of that. Industrial waste is what took us to the Ogoni cleanup, for example, but it doesn't only stop in Ogoni. All where we have industrial estates are having that sort of problem. Maybe before now, before the issue of the Ogoni, nobody pays attention to it, but if I take you, for example, to Kaduna, Kakuri, where the textiles were, while we were growing up, we really see these pollutions because where people used to do the irrigation along the river banks, we saw reduction in the quality of plants that sprout. We see also dead sites. We never knew what it was then, and there was no regulation to curb it. If you go to Kano, maybe the Chalawa estate, you see the Chalawa Gully, also the production there is very, very low without, people who are not taking care of those wastes. And oftentimes, our children go into those waters and come out with diseases that are incurable, not knowing the source. So really, now there is a comprehensive law is following up these industries to see how they discharge this waste, and then there are laws in place to punish those who are in default of those laws.
Okay, we'll return to you in a moment, but let's go to the phones because our first caller is already on the line from Kaduna, Hausawa. Hello, good evening. Are you there with us?
Well, good evening, Mr.
Good evening.
Actually, my question goes like this. Please, I really want to know what the EPA is doing to protect the greenhouse gases emission that affects the global warming. And the second question is, I really want to know the source of greenhouse gases in Nigeria.
All right. Thank you very much. Straightforward question. And yes, Dr. Tarfa can take on that.
Yes, basically, you asked a question about what the EPA in Kaduna State is doing. It's important to let you know that we are operating a federal system, and the federal government have succeeded in assisting the states to establish states environmental agencies as well as climate change desk officers in the respective ministries of environment. Now, they are drawing most of their regulations and laws based on what is obtainable at the federal level. So we are collaborating with them very closely, and we know the situations all over the country in respect of what is expected of them to do. For instance, now, in the area of emission reductions, what are they to do? I believe they don't have the guidelines and standards which they have put in place. But they are drawing what the federal has done in respect of NESRIA. The Honorable Minister have told you that NESRIA is following up on those standards. So the states are drawing from it, and also we have assisted them to develop what we call the climate change resilience strategy, so that they will be able to cope with climate change in their respective states. Your second question, you asked about the sources of the greenhouse gases. Basically, it is the fossil fuel, which is the #1 emission source of emissions of greenhouse gases. But it doesn't end also on fossil fuel alone. If you look at the decarbonization or the cutting down of trees itself, because trees are made up of carbon, and by the time you cut it or you burn it, you are releasing the carbon, and they mix with air and become carbon dioxide, which has high potential for high climate potential. So this is basically emissions from vehicles is a source of greenhouse gases, emissions from industries, emissions from burning of fossil fuel is basically source of emissions, as well as, like I said, from farming, clearing of farmland. That is why we kept on emphasizing the bush burning too. We kept on emphasizing that if you want to cool the earth, you plant a tree. So government has put in place regulations, policies. We have a climate change policy. We also have what we call the nationally determined contribution, which informed the Paris Agreement, which Mr. President have signed. It has given us a blueprint on how to cope, and we have realized that the 5 sectors that emits most of the greenhouse gases in Nigeria are basically agriculture, oil and gas sector, transportation, because the number of vehicles we have on our highways are very enormous, and also from industrialization, and then the power sector. These 5 sectors are the major emitters of greenhouse gases, and for you to cope these emissions, you have to put in place a strategy on how to move the processes in these sectors to the green economic pathway.
All right, we'll return to you shortly, but we have another caller from Lagos, calling in from Lagos. Right. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, go right ahead.
Hello?
Go right ahead.
Hello, good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Yeah, my question is... Hello? Yeah, my question is, I would like to know what the federal government is doing regarding turning waste to wealth. Because it's an untouched sector, you know, there's a possibility for us turning the waste into wealth, like using some of these domestic waste or industrial waste to generate biogas, which we can use to provide electricity or even maybe just light up street lights. There's also a possibility for us to use some of these agro waste to provide or cultivate fruits like edible mushrooms. You know, I did it in my undergraduate project, and Federal Institute of Industrial Research, Oshodi, I think they are doing something on that. Now, these are ways that we can actually help in alleviating poverty and also generating electricity. Is there anything the federal government is actually doing to invest more in that aspect? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you. Let me just answer quickly on those 2 issues. Probably you are not aware. I know in more than 10 states now, federal government has installed metal waste plant and plastic waste plant. And I'm happy you talk about the agricultural waste that is being used for mushroom production and all of that. And beyond that, we're even into collecting of this polythene that they use for sachet water and co, and has been converted to selling material, as well as the degradable polypod material that we use in seed raising. So all of that is being done. If you want to know more about that, I think I will invite you to visit Forestry Service of Nigeria. You will see a lot of waste-to-weight material that we have developed. But I can tell you authoritatively that the federal government had put in place, I know there's one in Sokoto, I know there's one that's going on in Nasarawa, I know there's one in Oyo State, but I am very sure we have in more than 10 states where metal plants are put to convert waste metals to usable materials, as well as for other materials. So the federal government is mindful of that, and I know a lot of plant is in place. It's just for the stage that where these projects are done to take ownership. It's not willing to do it as a business, but at least to put it in place to support the state that have such plant in their state, to take ownership of it and continue to run it to support various waste in that state. Thank you.
All right. Let me quickly return to Dr. Tarfa here. You spoke earlier of the main cause of greenhouse gases, and talking about emissions from vehicles or transportation system. Is there any regulation regarding the emissions from vehicles on the roads? I know some countries have strict regulations about it. Do we have any such regulation in Nigeria?
Certainly we have. We have those regulations which is being operated and enforced by the Nigerian Environmental Standards Regulation and Enforcement Agency, that is NESRA. But you also have to take into account that this is a developing country.
Right.
And as a developing country, there's what we call survival emissions. You cannot just wake up absolutely and say a vehicle that is maybe 5 years old or 10 years old should not be imported into the country. You have to put into fact, you have to consider the socio-economic development of the country in itself. But by and large, what the climate change regime is encouraging is the gradual movement away from carbon-intensive vehicles into the renewable energy vehicles that are being produced by the developed world. For instance, when we went to Poland for the Conference of Parties, virtually all the buses that were used by the delegates in moving up and down are electric vehicles with zero emissions. So these are things that are gradually coming forward. And some countries, developed countries, have already put legislation by saying by the year 2020 or 2030, they are going to phase out carbon-intensive vehicles. They are reducing the emissions. Another area that is gaining traction is use of ethanol. The last caller talked about biomass. Yes. So these are all cleaner sources of energy, which the engines are being retrofitted. The Climate Change Department in the Ministry of Environment is already in discussions as a fallout towards the implementation of the Paris Agreement in Nigeria by having discussions with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change to introduce what we call hydrogen economy. The hydrogen economy will help us to mop up all the waste in Lagos. We are using Lagos as the pilot city because of the quantum of waste that is found in Lagos. This will now be converted into hydrogen, and the technology is there that vehicles are coming that will use hydrogen as a means of transportation. So what will be the emissions that will be coming out from the vehicles is water. When hydrogen mixes with oxygen, it produces water, and it has not effect on the climate.
All right. Still back, Minister, back to domestic waste. Dr. Advocacy, you started talking about it. The huge challenge of polythene, plastics and such things. Sachet water everywhere you see it's dumped everywhere. And a lot of these packages are biodegradable. What is the thinking of government? Because this is a huge source of pollution.
Yes, it is a huge source of pollution. But like the DG of FRIN told you, we have, as a pilot in his school, done some pilot to use this polythene, for example, to mix with some other wastes to come up with ceiling boards that could be used in our houses, to also use it as the container for putting our seeds to in our nurseries. Those products now become biodegradable, so to speak. But in the whole of this, I see an economy, if properly tapped, we could engage our teeming youth in the collection of some of this waste.
All right, so
and some money,
exactly,
and some money, take it to a place where it can be converted into further wealth. So if we look at the whole of this conversation, we can see that a positivity can come out of this seemingly problem that we all see. All we need is the right setting, the right discussion with these teeming youths that ordinarily, we have seen an example of that in one of the administrations in Lagos State that used those youth to collect those wastes, made some money, cleaned up the environment, and everybody is happy. So it's a win-win, and that's what government is trying to pursue.
All right. A caller from Lagos actually talked about waste to wealth, and that's all part of it. But let's return to the cleanup of Ogoniland and the commitment to it. Yes, this is a project that, is not a short term. It's something that will most certainly, outlast 2 administrations from now. And so the question skeptics have always asked is one that deals with many issues in Nigeria. The commitment, the sustainability, and ensuring that this project goes on and is not aborted midway for any reason whatsoever.
Very good. You can see the commitment of government. I think we are at a stage where you can't reverse what has been started. One, we have got the international buy-in because United Nations is involved. They are the author of the report, and they are involved. As I speak with you now, a United Nations team is right there in Ogoniland assessing what we have done so far. The financing of this project is right there, sitting in the accounts, and consistent subscription to the fund will continue. What do we have in place as a mechanism? We have a governing council that is inclusive of indigenous Ogoni people. We have a board of trustees that consists of indigenous Ogoni people. And of all of these places that were assessed, some of them we've started handing over to contractors, like the project coordinator has told you. But did we hand the contractor over the site? No. We engage the community leadership so as also to get the buy-in of the community. And so I don't think this thing can be reversed by any one administration, even if the administration of Muhammadu Buhari passes on. All other administration cannot reverse what we have started today.
Let's talk about some of the theories we get to hear, especially the activities of the multinationals and regarding this project. It has always been felt that this may not be to their advantage, and therefore there are, cogs that they can always put in the wheel. Another area I'd want you to look at as well is the issue of gas flaring. Gas flaring and revenues, where people pay to flare the gas, but destroys the environment.
Yeah, thank you very much. With regards to whether the multinationals are a problem to the project or to HYPREP, certainly not. The cleanup is a multi-stakeholder activity. It's an exercise, an activity that is beneficial to all the parties, beneficial to the local communities, beneficial to the oil companies. It is a process that allows for improvement, our regulatory agencies, and all that it takes for a better environment. And what is it that the companies have done so far? They have given their commitment to release the funds. The funds sitting in the Board of Trustees account are those released by the oil companies. There's no stronger commitment you could get than that. And they continue to work with HYPREP, including providing from the background support services. So there is so much the oil companies are doing. But we all understand the effect of oil pollution on health, on the environment, on our economy. Because, for example, where you see situations of artisanal refining and all of those activities that do not only just pose a threat to the human beings who are doing it, but also our economy, to the environment. And so collectively, we all have to halt it, and the oil companies are in the forefront of that, as well as the community and government, who is rolling out all the laws and ensuring that regulators are effective in doing what they have to do. Gas flaring is an issue that also we need to look at. But behind that, it's the need to probably review some of the laws that we currently have, because the process or the need to do this is far more important than whatever benefit that we currently enjoy.
Well, yes.
Yeah, I want to take it up from that. I know that some of all these environmental consequences are disasters. They're actually quite many. And as a developing country, we could even have insufficient revenues to address most of all these issues. Just like about clean energy, about electric vehicles, we can't just transit to that because we're a developing country. We don't even have, most of all these vehicles are very, very costly. Pollution from textile industries and all that. But there are some kind of low-hanging fruits, and that's been bothering the civil society for some time. Taking gas flaring, for instance, we are talking about the Ogoni cleanup, what was done within decades, and now we're trying to, address that. But looking at gas flaring, we were in some oil-producing communities some while ago, because we collect those human and good stories from communities, amplify, through advocacy, so that relevant stakeholders can address the issue. We saw gas flaring, we saw the fire, and this is actually happening when we're having electricity deficit, and gas is being flared. In short, even oil firms actually pay certain amounts of money to continue flaring. I think the government actually have to look at that, because it has their consequences, extensive consequences. Respiratory, health, even livelihoods, reduction in farm produce, farm yield, poor yield and all that, even health issues, and, we witness it firsthand, and we think that the government can do something about it in that regard. Looking at comparatively, we have several oil-producing countries in the world, from Indonesia to Brazil to the Gulf, to the Gulf countries. But they don't have some of all these issues, spillage, flaring. So we should also look at what we could learn from them, in terms of addressing all those issues, because that kind of accumulating, leading to climate change, leading to some of all those issues. And I think, regulatory-wise, a lot could still be done in that regard.
All right. Let's return to the phones briefly before we get a response to that. And from Jos, Ada is calling in tonight. Hello, Ada.
Yes, hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Ada from Jos. The idea of destroying illegal makeshift refineries in the Niger Delta is a source of concern, because in the process of destroying them by the military or task force, it further destroys the environment. need to use restiveness, make those engaged in this illegal activity to become more militant. In my opinion, it would have been better to engage those involved, give them adequate training, build modular refineries for them. This will enable them to take out a living, thus making them reasonable citizens. Another concern is the deforestation. There is an increase in indiscriminate cutting of trees now because of the high cost of kerosene. No amount of sensitization can stop the poor masses from getting involved in this act. But what is the government doing to address this issue of high cost of kerosene? God bless Nigeria.
All right. Thank you very much, Ada. Two powerful questions there. Minister, you want to take on that?
Yes. Thank you very much, Ada, for this, your observation, and I think they are very, very key. Now, part of the process of the Ogoni cleanup is to engage the youth, empower women, and also be discussing with critical stakeholders on one hand. Secondly, there are livelihood projects that will engage the youths, give them some training, skill acquisition, and empower them so that they can be useful citizens and not go on this busting pipes and so on, so therefore degrading the land more. Now, on the fuel issue, government is also looking at a situation. We have done a lot of acquisition of gas stoves, which is going to be shared to some people as a pilot. Then when we see the acceptability from the citizenry, then it could be, the number could be increased. There is also another stove that we have fabricated and as a test that will be using briquettes. What do we do to produce these briquettes? Waste from sawdust, husks of rice, since we are now a rice-growing nation, so the husks that are byproducts of those rice will be used to make briquettes, and we will use them for fuel to cook, and then it will reduce the adverse effect of tree cutting and deforestation.
Okay. I'd like to go over to our Lagos Center and put this across to Dr. Muktari Aminu Kanu. And that has to do with deforestation. The last caller, of course, talking about the price of fuel, kerosene, for instance, and says there's no amount of sensitization that will stop the masses from felling trees for firewood. So the question of deforestation is a lingering one. I'd like to hear your comments on that.
Yes, thanks, Cyril, for that question, because that's an area where my organization, the Nigerian Conservation Foundation, is really, really concerned about. We've actually worked with many stakeholders to, again, as Dr. Adepoju said, really support whatever the government and everyone else is doing so that we can increase the forest cover in the country. It is appalling that we are losing between 350,000 to 400,000 hectares of land every year. And it is appalling that Nigeria has one of the highest rates of deforestation in the world. And Adao is right, the caller, that you can't just stop this by fiat. You can't do it by sensitization. You have to provide alternatives. And again, like I say, we can't put all of this on the government alone, although the government should be the driver. But still, the main issue about energy and use of firewood is a key issue for Nigeria, because more than 60% of households are using firewood. And they are using firewood in 3-stone fires, or open fire, really. And then they put a pot on it, and most of the energy disappears. So we need to bring more fuel-efficient stove. They are also burning the wood directly. We need to use more packed energy like briquettes and charcoal, as people said. But one of the most painful things about deforestation in Nigeria is that we are also an exporter of charcoal. Can you imagine that not only are we having the highest rate of deforestation, but we are cutting down our trees, burning them and getting all the pollution, and then exporting charcoal to other countries that use it. Meanwhile, even in our cities, like the city I come from, Kano, you find out that people are not even using charcoal stoves or briquettes. They are using raw firewood on open fire. So deforestation is really a horrible big issue that Nigeria has to address because it is causing massive desertification. People talk about desert encroachment as if the desert is coming from Niger and Chad to meet us. No, this desert is made in Nigeria. It's by the cutting of trees, by poor looking after of our soils, by all these bad practices on irrigation, agriculture, logging, and all of these that we are creating deserts internally. And in order to really stem that, we need to grow more trees. We need to get more energy efficient. We need to bring alternative sources of energy for cooking in Nigeria. That is a national emergency, I think.
Yeah, just to add to what my brother Dr. Mutara just said, I think we also need the support of state.
Right.
You are very aware that the federal government has no land except the one acquired before the Land Use Act. And when state, even when we meet in National Council on Environment and we had agreement as to what to do with our various land, most of these reserves that we said are today football field or estate were done by the federal. But after the Land Use Act and most of this reserve returned back to the state, every state will tell you the land belongs to them. And federal is just, we are trying under the current administration to see how we can go into an MOU with state and say, okay, leave this 500 hectares. I'll give you an example of Niger State. Just because it wants us to help reforestate Niger State, willingly sign an MOU of 1,000 hectares with us, that this land is given to government, but for this purpose alone. The same thing, just a letter that I was directed to write to the Ondo State governor over the, because we have somewhere called Queen's Plot in Ondo State. People come all the way from Australia to come and see this Queen's Plot, just 42 hectares. But a tree in Queen's Plot, the base alone is bigger than this studio. But we discovered that some people, illegal fellas, enter and drop about 120 stumps there, and we agree with the governor of the state that nobody will pick those trees, they will rot there and go back to the nature. How many states is giving such a cooperation to Federal Ministry of Environment?
Okay.
If this support is not given to Federal Ministry of Environment, we can only regulate. So most of the problem happen with the state. And until we have the cooperation of the state as to how to preserve and conserve what we have in various states, we cannot achieve it.
Well, as they say, for every tree you take down, you plant how many? 2, 3?
Well, we say 10.
10, right, okay. For felling one tree.
But it doesn't stop at planting.
Right.
Every tree you plant
you nurture.
and you don't nurture for 5 years,
well,
will die back.
Okay, all right. Well, just before we take a short break, and of course, Chambers Mezulike would be leaving us after this break. But before we let you go, I'd like to hear your comments on what was raised earlier on, the destruction of the illegal refineries, which I think Ada raised, and said that in itself is creating more environmental problems. What's your take on that?
I think that has to be addressed too. What I really think the country should do is to look at this country comparative, studies. What other countries are doing effectively to make sure that oil production is being done in a very, very clean way. There wouldn't be any spillage, there wouldn't be any gas flaring. So that we'll see what we can learn, from these country case studies and implement that. And I want to also assure the minister that young people are also at the front line of making sure that the environment, is secured. And we're looking at it from the point of social accountability. In short, Follow the Money, was founded by a young Nigerian, Hamza Lawal. We're looking at it from the point of social accountability. The government has limited resources. Talking about the Great Green Wall and some of all these interventions, we want to follow the money and make sure that, these funds are implemented so well, so that we'll make sure that, the environment is restored and our future generations will have access to a better environment.
All right. Well, it's and it's not just the illegal refineries that have been destroyed. We see all the time hard drugs, psychotropic substances. Things go up in flames, and we tend to wonder what it does to the environment. But we'll talk about this and much more after this break. Stay with us on NTA Tuesday Live. We'll be back shortly.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying with us. As usual, we went out to talk to the citizens. Let's get to hear their views.
You're going to clean up is not going to be a straightforward, immediate thing. I heard it's not a 1 year, 2 years, 3 years thing. It's a long-term thing before the environment is gotten back to what it used to be. You understand?
Map them out, tag them as government non-go area zone. You put a big signboard there and use a barbed wire to secure the place.
Then for the people in the Ogoniland, they should try as much as possible to be more receptive and also to have an open heart to work with the government and make sure that it is solved, because this very issue affects their lives, affects their children, affects their family, affects their plants. So I think it's something that they should embrace with all entirety, and then make sure that they work with the government to ensure that everything works perfectly.
There should be an encouragement rather of farming, particularly around that particular region where the desertification in the north. And also the government should try as much as possible to move some of those people that are in that part of the country that.
All right. The people speaking. All right. And just as we're on that, we were joined by another guest, Dr. John Osowa, a climate change and environmental expert. He's an adjunct professor of environmental law and climate change policy. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Well, you've had the opportunity to listen to the various views that have been put across here since we started this program. We'd like to get your take on the issues at stake here now.
Well, I want to begin with the organic cleanup. I want to say that I'm very pleased that after a few years with this administration, that we have finally broken ground. We actually have contractors on site about to embark on the cleanup. As many have said, it's a long-term remediation and restoration project. I hope that the kind of political will that we have seen and that has translated to action will persist even beyond the tenure of this administration, however long that may be, that other administrations will pick up the gauntlet and continue to move with it, because it is very, very critical that we do that. The Ogoni cleanup issue is a test case for Nigeria. If you look at the UNEP report, one could argue that it's one of the most damning cases of pollution that we've seen anywhere around the world. I've read a lot of reports about pollution dating back to the Exxon Valdez oil spill in the U.S. So this one eclipses what we have seen in terms of the depth of contamination, the extent even into the aquatic areas, the impact on livelihoods and lives. So I think it's a step in the right direction, and we want to applaud the federal government for actually, after so many years, and this is almost 9 years that UNEP came up with a report, we are finally seeing action on the ground. But I want to look at the global issue that is confronting us. If you look at the global phenomenon called climate change, it is a ferocious force. And unfortunately, I don't want to be a doomsday prophet, it's going to get worse in the short term. And there are many indicators for that. You look at the Arctic ice melting. The Arctic region, as you know, is exactly the size of Africa. It's about 30 million square kilometers of space, which is exactly the continental space of Africa. That ice has melted. We have satellite images from the US dating back to the 80s. You look at the satellite images we had from the 80s to now, you will see that over half of the ice has melted, ice of that quantum. And we're talking about ice that is so thick, in some areas it's up to 1 kilometer thick, and now it's thinning also. So, and the problem with that is it feeds into all the major water systems, feeds into the immediate area, the Arctic Ocean, feeds into the Barents Sea, Pacific, Atlantic, which affects us here. So the reason I'm highlighting it is we're going to see more flooding in Nigeria because the sea level is naturally higher. The ice has increased the water volume, so you don't need as much water to have flooding in Nigeria. That's an impact of climate change. Then you look at the issue of desertification. It is having a very serious security impact on Nigeria. A lot of people don't draw the association. When you hear of herdsmen and farmers' clashes, it appears to be divorced from climate change, but it actually is epicentered in the climate change problem we have. How so? At any given point in Nigeria, you have at least 20 million cattle that must graze. They need water, they need about 1 billion liters of water every single day to graze that. And then you have sheep, about 40 million. You have a goat. And these are all grazing animals that roam the landscape. At this particular juncture in time, there's just not enough fodder. There is not enough grass within the frontline northern states to cater to that amount of cattle. And then you have also migration from Niger and Chad and all those places because their situation is even worse than our own. So it is a security threat because there's a natural inclination to go where the grass is green. Unfortunately, that leads to communal clashes that will not abate in the short term. So we need to have multidisciplinary approach to this. It's a huge food security problem. It's a national security problem. It's a threat to our unity, as we've seen. So I think we need to take climate change very seriously. The reason I'm particularly worried is you see that the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is increasing. We've been measuring it for over 150 years now in Hawaii. And when you look at just in the last few years, we have breached the threshold of 400 parts per million in the atmosphere. And what that means, we have also seen historically, even when you sample ice cores going back thousands of years, you see that there is a direct relationship between increased carbon in the atmosphere and higher temperatures. So not surprisingly, if you look at the temperature record in the past 12 years, we have had record-breaking temperatures for 10 years out of those 12, and every year eclipses the past year. So I think we need to take climate change seriously at a national level, at a global level, and this kind of program is key to that.
All right, thank you very much. And some of the issues are still being raised, that of desertification and what's been done. Again, this might sound simplistic, but year in, year out, the government goes around, carries out campaigns, tree planting campaigns, symbolic planting of trees, and after the ceremonials, nobody knows what happens to those trees. And the next year comes and we engage in a whole lot of ceremonials again. Where is this taken? Is there any way to measure the impact of all these campaigns, all these years?
Thank you very much. That was the story. We are in January, and I've gone around a lot of the plots that were planted in the past season to monitor and see how those woodlots are doing. For the first time, you've had we've planted over 800 hectares of trees. This is never been done before. And what are we doing? We are not only interested in the quantum that was planted, but to sustain it and to steadily do it over the time that we will be in government. We'll consistently be doing as much. What other thing are we doing? You can see that we have the National Agency for the Great Green Wall doing afforestation. We have the Forestry Research Institute doing afforestation. We also have our own Department of Forestry doing afforestation. We have the national parks doing afforestation. The Climate Change Department has driven some resources, mobilized through the Green Bond, which was, we had the first outing last year. This year again, we are just coming back from Lagos, where I addressed the Climate Finance Accelerator Conference, so that we can gather the banks, national banks, with some international concerns, came around so that we can see how we can generate more of these green bonds to deploy into taking care of the environment via these afforestation programs and some other programs that we have.
Right.
If I can add to what my boss just submitted, and the directive we're giving is not only to plant. What are we planting? We're planting indigenous tree species that will not only affect the environment, as we're talking about carbon emission or carbon trading, we're also planting trees that will have economic support and social support. Most of the trees we're planting, like I told you earlier on, are trees that have reduced their gestation period from 25 to maximum of 5 years before they start fruiting. The only trees that you find among what we're planting now that will go beyond 5 years before making contribution are those ones that are specifically meant for environment contribution, and those are the hardwood. When we talk about teak or beech, all of that, or mahogany, those are the ones we're planting along the shelter bed, so that they'll be able to withstand the desert problem. And that's what Great Green Wall is doing from Sokoto through to Borno State. They are covering about 1,500 kilometers by 15 kilometers. And not beyond that, we're also mandated not only to plant, but each community you get to, make sure you leave a community support program in terms of land for grazing for their cattle, where they need to support them with borehole, where you are supposed to do orchard for that community, do an orchard for them. Where you're supposed to do an agroforestry for them, do for them, so that, and we're not only planting just anyhow tree, we're also looking at those trees that have socio-economic relationship with the community, that they have socio-cultural attachment to.
Okay.
So down, bottom top.
All right.
So
yes.
Maybe just to add to that, that the climate change regime has also given us an opportunity under a mechanism known as the clean development mechanism.
Right.
Whereby the developed countries will come into a developing country and undertake projects that leads to emission reduction. And that will help them to meet their quantified emission reductions in their home countries, and helping the country also to meet the sustainable development. And by so doing, a lot of projects are being conceptualized and being implemented in the afforestation program. So climate change has actually given a broad-based platform whereby the FRIN is doing mitigation activities, the same thing with drought and desertification, the Great Green Wall. These are all climate change activities which are being done to help the country to adapt and then to mitigate the impact.
All right, we'll assess the Great Green Wall project in just a moment, but let's get back to the phones. We have Sani calling in from Lagos. Hello, Sani. Oh, I think we lost that call from Sani. So if you're still with us, Sani, just keep trying on, and hopefully we'll get you on the platform, and so you can hear your views. But back to the Great Green Wall project and its assessment, because a lot of Nigerians have been asking about this, and we thought we could put this to the minister and get more explanations. The challenges of the Great Green Wall, for instance, and where we are now.
Well, the challenges of the Great Green Wall initially was, like he mentioned, to establish ownership for the communities along the frontline states to own the project. What are we talking about? Citizen science. This is your project. Maybe before now, it's just go and plant the tree, don't mind the people that are living there, and you just walk away. They will also walk away from those trees that you have planted. But what are we doing now? We are engaging the people that are a resident along the front line to say, these trees are yours, you are involved in the nurturing of these trees, and tell them the benefits that will come out of it. Like we said, there is a livelihood program around the project itself. What do they lack? Borehole? You've provided a borehole for them to drink from the borehole and water the plants. What do they need that is deficient? We don't have a school. Do a small school around there for their children to go to the school, and they will grow up owning up those plots of wood lots that are developed, and so it will be sustainable.
All right. Another caller on the line, this time from Maiduguri, Kabiru. Hello, Kabiru.
Well done. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, I have a question to ask on this very program. For example, we have seen from some areas cutting the trees to burning for charcoal for cooking.
Okay.
So, is there any problem for the climatic change
burning
around some areas like urban or regional, urban or rural areas?
Okay.
Well, another addition, as we have been taking on these environmental challenges. So I want my own to urge Nigerians to be conscious and environmental cleaning. Some community leaders and other people should gather themselves to be clearing their environment in order to prevent themselves from diseases.
Okay.
As we know, sometimes this happen in some areas. Like, I will give you one example. There is one army during this insurgency in Maiduguri. He is coming to some areas whereby there is a dirty. He will gather people to treat all the areas, and we really appreciate his contribution to that.
Right.
So please, I want this program to take any way to be clean in Nigeria.
Okay. Thank you. Environmental cleanliness, that's how he ended up. But interestingly, the first part of it actually was to find out if there's any effect really on the climate. He was talking about burning wood for charcoal.
Yeah, if you go to developed country, charcoal is also contributing to their GDP. It's just the way we go about doing the charcoal business here in Nigeria that's an issue. And if you go to developed country, how is it done? If you are into, let's take for example, if you are using teak, Tectona grandis, for your charcoal, and we know that the gestation period of teak is 10 years to come to maturity, and you know you use 1 hectare per year for your charcoal business, then you will be encouraged to have a 15-hectare plantation for your business, believing that before you come back to the original or the first hectare, you will have been 15 years old. And charcoal burning really is not allowed to smoke. That's why it's still a charcoal, because they make sure they control the escape of the heat and all of that, so that can be useful. They have a better way of doing it. But the Nigerian people are doing that's causing the issue is they are cutting the forest to do their charcoal and not planting. It's not their own plantation. So what the French government is encouraging, that if you want to go into this business, you start your own plantation, raise it and sanctify it with by the French environment that this was planted, raised by you, and is covering your business. And moreover, why do we have to carry Nigerian charcoal abroad for them to process into tablet of charcoal and send back to us to sell to us.
Yeah, you do the same thing with your oil, so
so many other things.
Right.
So, but we are trying to reverse that.
Okay. Well,
and the area I was talking
yes.
about the sanitation.
There's
a full-fledged parastatal in the Ministry of Environment doing that. That's Environmental Health Council. With their own is to regulate.
Right.
Every state subscribes to them, and they regulate to be sure what we used to call Wuli or Dubagiri those days. They're still there. Every state has its own, but probably they are not active.
Right. Let's return to Lagos. And you talked earlier on about attitudinal change, and the question of bush burning. Farmers engage in that. And there are some parts of the country where bush burning is for a purpose, is to get out certain animals, without mentioning directly, to get out certain animals. How do you begin to change that mindset that it's the best thing to do? Once it's the dry season, the fires start going up everywhere.
Thank you, Cyril. I think if you permit me just to talk a bit about the deforestation thing that is being discussed now, I think there are really three main ways you can address deforestation quickly. One of them is the fact that you have to reduce the rate at which we are felling down trees, period. Because we are felling down trees at such a huge rate that your planting is not catching up. And so no matter what planting you do, you are not really catching up with the rate at which you are losing it. And we have enough regulations, I think, to actually do that. It's just that they are not being enforced for one reason or the other. The second thing is about the firewood thing we mentioned, which needs to be addressed. We need alternative sources and better sources of household energy. Then another way to address the issue of deforestation is really to do the planting, as we are saying. And planting is in so many ways. Some you have to plant yourself, but some you just allow shoots that are coming up in farmlands, in many different places, to now gestate, as Dr. Adepoju said, and grow to maturity. And in our neighbors, Niger here, we have seen where a lot of areas have been re-greened just by farmers leaving saplings and small seedlings coming up in their farms to grow. And they have increased the productivity of their land all the same. So it's not reducing the amount of produce they get from the field. The other thing is we need better management and protection of the existing forests, forest reserves, and national parks that we have. So those, I think, are three crucial things you need to do if you want to address deforestation properly. And all of this must involve various stakeholders. You have to involve the communities, not just engage or involve them. You have to, the whole impetus has to come from them. And that then speaks to your question about how do we change attitudes? How do we stop people from indiscriminate bush burning? Bush burning as a clearance for agriculture is destructive. But there are certain types of bush burning, especially in the savanna, that are not so destructive, in fact, that are necessary to maintain the savanna. But the slash and burn agriculture we do is really a bad way of doing things. And farmers are just doing it because it's the most convenient, most affordable, cheapest thing. You have to provide alternatives for land clearing, which will stop people. If a farmer has a tractor or these other things easily accessible to him or her, they will not go into slash and burn. If they can get more productivity from their land, then they don't need to increase the amount of land that they cultivate and therefore do not need to burn and slash. But still, even now with that necessity, changing attitudes and behavior, as we said, is an important part of the component. And that should involve community leaders, faith leaders, a lot of information. It involves speaking to the heads of people, but also speaking to their hearts. It involves really, like I say, traditional rulers, religious leaders, us in NGOs, the government, and everybody to do the sensitization.
Dr. So, okay.
Let me just, I want to buttress what he has said, but I want to add another element in terms of being able to deal with our deforestation problem. And that issue is finding an alternative to wood. We have, right here in Nigeria, an abundance of alternatives. I'll pick one, bamboo. You know that around the world, bamboo has become a $60 billion industry because research and usage for thousands of years, especially in Asia, has shown that bamboo is better and cheaper than wood for any application that wood can do. Whether you're talking about cabinet making, whether you're talking about flooring, whether you're talking about furniture, whether you're talking about even toothpicks. Bamboo toothpicks are naturally hypoallergenic, they are stronger, they are cheaper. That's why you see bamboo flooding our supermarkets now as toothpicks. So that is, even our own Raw Materials Development Council has done research. So bamboo can create 25 million jobs. And we have an abundance of bamboo. World Health, Food and Agriculture Organization did research. About 20 states in Nigeria have abundant bamboo. You don't even have to refer to their research to know. Just drive through from the middle belt to the southern part of Nigeria, you will see it. So that is a resource that we need to harness. Other countries are harnessing it. It is more durable. And then you look at our pulp and paper industry. Research done shows that we are spending about 600 billion to import pulp for paper. Bamboo is a better resource for making paper. In terms of the tensile strength, is stronger. In terms of fiber yield, is 5 times the fiber yield. So we took this bamboo thing seriously. We went to Ghana, looked at what they are doing. They have gone far. We took a study to Ghana, looked at some of the species. There's even some species they are using in Ethiopia, where we went, Abyssinica species, that you can plant in the desert, and it does very, very well, with very little water. So those are things we can incorporate into it. And bamboo, most importantly, is a renewable, 100% renewable. Once you plant it, it never needs replanting forever. It continues to take over your landscape. And gestation period, maturity, is just 1 year, as opposed to 30 years or 25. So that's where the world is moving, and we need to embrace that in Nigeria. We have it in abundance.
Thanks so much. Right. Just as he has submitted, I think that's part of the charge the minister has given to us, that we need to be more feasible. I think instead of you going to Ghana and Ethiopia, if you had come to Ibadan, you'll have seen a lot of research that's gone on with that. Okay. But just quickly, let me just, the caller was asking the question about, you give a right about this poaching or the killing of animals and all of that. Right. I want to tell you that Nigeria and Forest Research of Nigeria had been adopted by UNESCO, solving that problem we call green economy. And the project site was on Mobasware Reserve in Ogun State. And you'll be shocked that just stopping them or sustaining the state abandoned ponds for farmers there, stop them from using chemical in the streams in the forest. Now, establishing grass cutter farming for them, stop them from putting fire in the forest.
For bushmeat.
And the first harvest, after 1 year, 200 farmers trained and grouped into 4, the list made 1.5 million as a group. And that was what brought UNESCO to come and look at the program and adopted Nigerian model as the model for Africa. And that was what informed Nigeria training the 7 countries around Lake Chad under BAPAD project. So that if they are engaged doing something around Lake Chad, then we can start the regeneration that Dr. Mustak talked about. Regeneration is even cheaper than planting. It's just to allow the land to be, for a period of time, it will naturally regain itself. But like we agreed here, there must be alternative for people before they can allow the land to follow.
Well, one of the callers earlier talked about, as in reference to the Ogoni cleanup, talked about the people offering their support to all the efforts. How has that gone so far?
I want to say that the Ogoni people have been most hospitable to the project. The leadership, they have embraced the project. The first thing we did when the project started was to do a community by community sensitization. And by that, we met with the paramount ruler of each community, the youth, the women leader, and all and the community development committee, CDC chairman, and members, council of chiefs. We did that in several communities. We've got 4 local governments that this project covers. In Gokana, we went to Budo, we went to Po, we went to Bidre, we went to Kedere, we went to Biara, we went to Bera, we went to Bomu. All of these communities in Gokana have impacted sites. We then moved to Eleme, we went to Ebubu, we went to Alode, we went to Ogale, and several other communities there. All the communities we visited are communities with impacted sites. Same applies to Thai, where we went to Korokoro, went to Boten, went to Weke, and then went to to Kana, where we did Kana, where we did Kwea, and Kwawa, and Bua. Now, these are the communities where the Honorable Minister visited recently and also handed the contractors to the community and the site to the contractors. When we did this, we got the support and we saw the smiles on the faces of the community leadership. In each of these places, we were swarmed by the people. And so one of the key advantages, or one of the important tools that have helped us to succeed, has been the support of the Ogoni people. That is what we've been doing.
Right. Well, there's an issue I had marked down to raise earlier on. Yes, we're a developing country and we're part of the global community. We're moving fast and it's a global village, as they say. What about e-waste? Yes. How are we tackling that? The minister or... Yes.
Okay. E-waste, of course, you know, as you said, we are getting very developed technologically. Right. A lot of our young men have embraced the computer age and have even achieved excellence in it. But the byproduct of that is that you have a lot of waste, even from our phones. So many phones in Nigeria. So that presents a tremendous opportunity for those who want to go into recycling. A lot of the components you will find used in e-waste are recyclable. But of course they have to deal with the Basel Convention, which regulates how you move these things across international boundaries. But by and large, there are countries that receive e-waste from Nigeria, especially in Europe, if you adhere to certain regulations. We are also receiving some of their, not what they call knockdown products, and trying to resuscitate or refurbish them. But I think we are not keeping pace with the amount of waste that is being generated. And some of those things have mercury content, which when you have rain, it washes into the communities, into the waterways. So that's an area where we need to do a bit more. In the US, of course, what we do is those sites are segregated from any living being, even animals. So the sites are very far away and they have multiple protective mechanisms, redundancies, to ensure that there's no leaching into the ground. Even the ground containment, you have to achieve a certain level of containment structure to have those things. But in summary, I think it's an area where we need to do more in terms of regulation, We need to do more in terms of harnessing the opportunities that exist. We have an entrepreneurial youth who can get into that, make a lot of money, do it safely, transform some of those products into local products that we can use. So it's an exciting area that needs to be.
Maybe I just add to what my friend had just submitted. I think we should commend Nigerian youth. If you go across most of the computer villages we have, you see that they're not really doing badly. But the only aspect I'm concerned about is whatever they manage to come out with from the waste, I want us to look at the health implication of it.
Right.
Because we are not bothered, and every agency that is charged with monitoring that area need to pay more attention, because most of these things are not feasible, and there are issues that could accumulate within the system over the time, and by the time it will be surfacing, it may be too late to manage.
You also have them coming from hospitals, health institutions as well.
Yes. So I think that's the area.
Right. I just wanted to also add that the Nigeria is a party to several conventions, United Nations Convention, which includes the Basel Convention on the Transboundary Movement of Hazardous Waste. And we are very active in it. The regulations have been put in place that have been passed by government to encourage proper utilization and disposal of this waste. Government has also set up a center at the University of Ibadan, headed by a professor, which is a regional center for control of this hazardous movement of waste. So, and we encourage a lot of recycling. These e-waste also have some components that are collected and shipped back to the manufacturer. And internally also too, there are components that are being used as raw materials for some certain production too in country. So government is very conscious of this responsibility, and it is really pursuing it most appropriately. But there's also business in it, whereby we have to get the youth to be trained accordingly for them to understand the implications of what they are doing and proper disposal. The public generally also have a role to play, because how do you dispose some of your waste, the e-waste, after you have finished using it?
Right.
For instance, some televisions that were hitherto, where are they now?
Right.
Maybe they have been disposed onto
those hutchbacks that don't exist anymore. Everyone has gone to the flat screen. Yes. So what do you do with your hunchback?
Yes. So there should be training, and there's a lot of training going on to create jobs for the youth, for them to know how to handle this and to collect it and recycle them accordingly.
Well, as we wind down, Minister, there are two issues here that I want you to comment on, and that would be the level of collaboration among government agencies that have to do with this. One has to do with indiscriminate digging of boreholes, and the other has to do with mining. We started off in the early part of this program talking about lead poisoning, mining activities and how to regulate them, and as I just mentioned, the question of boreholes all over the place, especially in urban centers. Recently, Abuja witnessed what was a scary experience to do with earth tremors, and part of it was placed at the doorstep of indiscriminate boreholes, and you find them everywhere. What is the level of collaboration as to articulate a government policy on these two areas?
Very well. I have always been an advocate of less boreholes in our communities. It has reached the level of I pass my neighbor, where everybody digs a borehole and not minding what happens to the environment. That is why we said consequences of our actions are some of the things that cause environmental degradation. Now, talking about collaboration, the Ministry of Environment is in collaboration with the Ministry of Solid Minerals Development in those areas that you have mentioned, in quarry activities or other mining activities, whatever it is. As a matter of fact, a borehole is water mining in another name, but I am not sure the Ministry of Solid Minerals Development look in that direction. It's left for development control to handle. But where we are collaborating with the Ministry of Solid Minerals is actually in the mine sector, and also with the Ministry for Federal Capital Territory here about the issue of these boreholes to take care of environmental health, pollution, and so on. So there is that collaboration between these agencies.
Yes, and as someone said, water resources. If people are to stop digging boreholes indiscriminately, then there has to be access to water. And these are also issues which are challenging, especially in urban centers like Abuja.
It is true. Most states or most cities are thirsty cities without adequate water supply. So people now look for some other means of getting potable water. But again, let's ask the question: are those water sources, the boreholes, are they really even fit for human consumption? So these are some other things that people don't factor in. Yes, we just dig boreholes, take water from them, and government should do more. State governments, for that matter, not federal government. Water resources is bending back too much to help the states in provision of potable water. But really, the supply of potable water is a strictly state government matter or even municipal issues. So I think federal government is doing so much in provision of, in helping to provide water in a lot of the cities.
Okay, let's round off with quick comments on foreseeable challenges, the result of climate change and other factors as well. Food security concerns have been raised that, for instance, the rains may be late this year, and that will prove really, really challenging for farmers in terms of agriculture. And you have placed part of the problem squarely at the doorstep of climate change, which again can be traced to some extent to human activities. So,
well, basically, in tackling climate change, we approach it from two angles. First is how do you mitigate? What causes the climate change itself is emissions of greenhouse gases from several sources. And for you to reduce that, that is what we call as mitigation. You have to mitigate the sources where these greenhouse gases are coming from. The secondly is to help, since you are already impacted by the impact of climate change, how do you adapt to that impact of climate change? These are two-pronged approach to tackling this situation. But however, science has already proven that the situations will get even worse because of increase in the emissions. The global warming, the Paris Agreement said we should work towards reducing the global warming to 2 degrees Celsius by the year 2030 or even 2050. But still, that is not sufficient. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, came up with a studies that went further to say, look, it has to be up to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So there is need for a collective and concerted effort to tackle this climate change.
All right. It's time for our goodbyes now, and so we'll start off from our Lagos Center, where we have Dr. Muktari Aminu Kano, Director General, Nigerian Conservation Foundation. Thank you for being on our program and sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cyril.
And back here in our Abuja studios, thank you to Dr. Shola Adipoju, Director General, CEO of Forestry Research Institute. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Well, and Dr. Peter Tarfa, Director of Climate Change, and his Nigeria's focal person. We thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Dr. John Osoma joined us halfway. I would like to thank you for your contributions. He's an adjunct professor of environmental law and climate change policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And for Dr. Marvin Dekel, Project Coordinator, Hydrocarbon Pollution Remediation Project, HYPREP, Ogoni Cleanup. We thank you.
Thank you, Cyril.
Minister, it's a pleasure to have had you on tonight. Minister of Environment, Suleiman Hassan Zarma, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Cyril.
All right.
And good night, viewers.
And thank you, too, for being part of this program. Next week, we'll reach you again on NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stover. Bye for now.